Welcome. Let me be the first to say thank you for joining our webinar today, The High-Stakes Game of Political Ad Testing. My name is Christine Chumba, and I'm the VP of Strategic Accounts at iModerate. Prior to joining iModerate, I worked for a political polling company, so today's topic is one that's pretty near and dear to my heart. That said, when we sat down last month to decide upon the next topic for our webinar series, we all thought that focusing on politics would be appropriate with the election cycle heating up as early as it seems to be this year. We're very fortunate to count Lisa Grove as a longstanding client and asked if she would like to join us and share some of her insights. So with that, let me quickly introduce Lisa to those of you who may not be familiar with her, and then I will turn things over. Lisa Grove has been the lead strategist and pollster for political candidates, nonprofit organizations, corporations, and labor unions for over 20 years. She's conducted polls and moderated hundreds of focus groups and dial test sessions for senatorial, congressional, gubernatorial, and presidential candidates. Advertising agencies, PR firms, and Fortune 500 companies have also relied on Grove Insights research to develop corporate image campaigns in the United States, Asia, and Latin America. A seasoned public speaker, Lisa has briefed heads of state, U.S. senators, Hollywood types, and the country's leading policymakers on a wide variety of issues. She's been quoted in publications ranging from the Wall Street Journal to Mother Jones, Oregon's Bend Bulletin to the Washington Post. She has also been a guest lecturer at the Graduate School of Political Management, American University, George Washington University, University of Portland, and Carleton College. Prior to starting her own company, Lisa was vice president at the Washington, D.C.-based Melman Group for 9 years. Before that, she was a research associate at Hill & Knowlton's research subsidiary, Strategic Information Research Corporation, and Belden Opinion Research. Her colleague Ben Patinkin is also on the line, and he'll jump in with some color commentary as needed. As most everyone is aware, the climate in this country is one where politics and government aren't exactly on people's list of favorite things. People are fed up, and therefore they have a much lower tolerance for political advertising, specifically ones that don't speak to them. There truly is no margin for error. So how can a political ad break through the clutter in 2012? How can it engage its intended audience and make them believe and persuade them? At this point, I will turn this over to Lisa and Ben, who will talk about some of the must-haves of political.
No clue about how hard it is out here, and that's making sure that it's relevant to their lives. Too often, I think in political campaigns, the decision is to say, here's what I want to talk about as a campaign, and you have to come and listen to what I have to say. And we're spending, I think, a lot more time thinking about behavioral psychology and how do we meet voters where they are. How do we get to their lives and penetrate their lives and have a conversation that is very real to what they have before them, and more self-interested. And I don't say that in a negative way, but just like anything, like any product, voters need to know what's in it for me. What am I going to get out of this? And then it would be I dream of the day where we could just say tastes great, let's filling, and get candidates elected. But it's more like a job interview. Voters are still put a lot of faith in the system, even though they're jaded and cynical. They still have hope about leaders accomplishing their priorities and getting it done for them, and they want to understand kind of the principles, the background. It's not just the resume. It's what are the values and motivations that brought this person to where they are today, and why is that relevant to what I want them to do for me? And so that's where we have to spend a lot of time. The other kind of confounding piece is that when you look at, it's a chase for money, as you guys can see in the paper every day. There's more outside groups and super PACs playing that can control the dialogue. In some of the races I'm doing, the two candidates in a race, like a race for Congress, for example, will be spending far less to talk about their platforms and why they should be elected or why their opponent should not than the third-party kind of independent groups. And so it's even more paramount that a candidate campaign is, has the very best and most impactful advertising when there is this kind of sea of other voices out there. Generally speaking, campaigns spend about 10% of their full budget on research, kind of as a rule of thumb, but that also includes issue and candidate research about the backgrounds of the players and other pieces of this. so we don't have very much money to kind of figure out what the heck to do. We have a shocking, little amount. It would be maybe one kind of benchmark survey, 15 or 20 minutes long, and maybe 1 or 2 tracking surveys in an entire congressional race, for example. And when you think about what's on TV, what generally speaking, I mean, it can be somewhere, in an average congressional race, the presidential, and we're working on the presidential race, and that's obviously, lots of ads for a long period of time. But for your average congressional race, for example, it could be 2 to 4 TV ads from your campaign that is the sum total of what you're going to say. And with TV ads being, somewhere from 65 to 80 words long, that's not much dialogue to have. And that generally speaking, the ads are seen about 12 to 14 times in order to move a message. And obviously we've got to try to cut through the clutter with 2 to 4 ads seen 12 times makes it really difficult. The other, confounding problem, except in the cases where they're third-party candidates, is that, it's not just moving a couple percentage points. I mean, in a lot of the kind of market research we do, you get it's sort of a 6% uptick in sales or something like that, and that's good. Well, we have to get 50 plus 1. And so we have a bigger swath of consumers to go try to, give information to, and that obviously makes it more difficult. Plus, we don't, when you think about most products and most other advertising to try to persuade people to make a purchase decision or a vote choice, there isn't attacks from opponents and outside sources. And so, we not only have to figure out kind of what our best, selling proposition is relative to our opponent, but we also have to make sure we're inoculating against what could be attacks coming our way. For us, within, because we have very, very challenging goals, and like any product or any group of people, those of us who work on the front lines are way too steeped in campaigns, and we know all the acronyms, and we understand what's going on behind the scenes, and we're not very good judges of whether or not we've communicated and translated what we've learned from the polling and our strategic objectives into advertising that's going to move a group of voters that we spend very, very little time talking to, except in a focus group setting, just because we are kind of, in this weird political chattering class that often isolates us from our customer base. So all of those things make the stakes high and, make this more confounding, which is where iModerate comes in for us. There's no question that we have won many races because of the work that we've done and the way in which we've tested ads. And going in and letting voters have a seat at the table is really, really critical for the reasons I've stated, because of the high stakes and the fact that we are so kind of deep into the Kool-Aid that we're not really going to be the right people to move. The question isn't whether or not this message moves Lisa Grove or Ben Patinkin, because we've already made up our minds. We've got to make sure that we're moving that muddled middle, which is a large swath of voters. Looking at the thing that we like about this methodology is that it blends what we think is the best of both worlds, which is a quantitative look and the value of really good qualitative research. Prior to doing ad testing this way, in the old days we do focus groups and you get the kind of Siskel and Ebert. People came in thinking that maybe they would get a job with an ad agency at some level and, kind of offering up their critique of ads in a way that felt incredibly inauthentic and artificial and not something they would necessarily do, on the couch. Have used dials, and they can get us, a good distance, but we're not going to get hundreds of people in a room, generally speaking, to do dials. That just doesn't, it's unmanageable and very, very cost prohibitive. The one-on-one intercepts, good, but again, you can't get that kind of quantitative advantage. So we love the fact that we can capture a lot of opinions, that we have a more reliable sample size to analyze. We can look at the demographic and geographic differences. The fundamental question is not how well an ad worked, but did we move our targets? And the other thing, that the second-by-second reactions are immensely helpful because we can look very specifically line by line in an ad and say, okay, here's what worked, here's what didn't work. This spokesperson somehow had a credibility issue, and because when every time that person spoke, we could see the dials drop. And that gives us, oftentimes, I think I can say that there's never been a situation where we've done the testing through iModerate where we didn't end up tweaking an ad, because it can always be better. And with this methodology, voters tell us specifically how, and this is one way. The immediate reporting is really, really important because we have a finite window with which to communicate, and I know it seems like forever this year because it started with the Republican nomination process and it really hasn't stopped. But because we have so many gross rating points, so much bandwidth behind each ad on TV, we need to test and get back up very, very quickly, or we're burning kind of dollars and gross rating points that we need for the next message, and we're wasting resources, wasting precious resources. So it's almost always the case that we get the data back and we pull an all-nighter and tell our team, exactly what needs to be done to retool, fix, and so that we can get on the air very quickly with what's coming next. We can also project it to larger populations. We can look at pre and post testing, go back and compare it to the data we've collected through telephone surveys and other means, and really look to see what's different. Looking at the qualitative, obviously we get the whole story. We will sometimes tally responses and just see what are they saying back to us. And sometimes we'll say, wow, they're using words consistently, not only are they understanding our message, because we can tell by the way they're parroting it back to us, but frankly, their words are better than the words we used in the ad. So let's go ahead and put that in. And it can help make subtle but powerful tweaks. Sometimes it can tell us really obvious things that we didn't see. In the presidential race last time around, we were testing some ads and around the economy, and we were really gearing an ad we were doing toward men. And we didn't get the fact that we had completely emasculated this man in the ad. His wife was speaking the entire time. The only images we had of him were kind of at the sink doing dishes with his hands kind of up to his elbows in sudsy water, and then sitting way over in a corner of their kitchen on a chair that was too small for his frame with a little cup of coffee, looking like he was completely beleaguered. And, should we have caught that? Of course we should have. But it just seemed like a family struggle ad, story of strife, what they're going to do, how to do to fix the problem, And what these people said to us is, gee, way to make the guy look like he's not in charge of anything in his domain. The poor sod's lost his job. You don't even let him speak. And so, that's less than subtle. That was, uh-oh, we got to go back to the drawing board. It also, helps us understand the extent to which they can extend a message. Sometimes you offer an emblem or a metaphor or a value, and we hope that it does more than just a few words. How we respond to the recession is a test of who we are as a people. Does that help people think about this person as leaving the world wanting to leave the world a better place for their children and caring about the future, or caring about being principled, the kind of pieces that go with that, and the qualitative really helps us do that. And I will say that iModerate has helped us countless times figure out how to ask the right questions and among whom. The nice thing is we can decide who we want to ask questions to and pull out our target voters, or see oftentimes we want to understand who has responded to the ad, who's moved toward us as a result of watching the ad. We also want to know who stayed stuck, who was really entrenched and hard to move, and why weren't we able to move these people. And that is also the real value of the qualitative, and very, very helpful to us as we think about how we do all of this.
And I'd just add that, this has been thinking, I'd add that the result of that, and trying to understand exactly how to move those folks, sometimes, has led us to even, not just tweaking particular words or images within an ad, but taking maybe two of our better testing ads and cutting out half of each and then combining what we have left into, based on responses, both qualitative and quantitative, what we find to be the, most compelling thing we can do to move that particularly stubborn segment of the electorate.
That's right. The other thing that we do is, and I will say we do the chats, the one-on-one chats. We also ask open-ended questions and have them give their responses. And I think sometimes people worry that with online, when you ask people to kind of provide online responses, that you get kind of textese, LOL, BRB, blah, blah, blah. We get such rich data. We just presented data a couple of weeks ago where we had this one man who really told a beautiful story about, how the ads really changed kind of the evolution of his thinking on a big national issue. And we were able to look at all of his open-ended responses and just kind of graph the trajectory of his attitude change in a way that was emblematic of other voters, but really gave us kind of more detail to understand how he was making his choices.
Cool. All right, well, with that, I'm quickly just going to give an overview of iModerate for those of you who may not be as familiar with us. As you've probably gathered by now, we certainly specialize in online one-on-ones, but we have a threefold approach to capturing insights that I quickly want to review. So first and foremost, it's our online one-on-ones. Sessions are all professionally moderated by our team here in Denver. And because they're real-time, the feedback is extremely top of mind and in the moment. It's based on an IM technology, which of course is very familiar to all types of respondents. And it provides an anonymous experience for respondents, which really inspires authentic and candid feedback. We found, certainly with all of our political work, that it's really a perfect medium for sensitive topics like politics and whatnot. Next is our insight framework. It's based on 3 cognitive theories, and it helps us understand how voters and consumers make decisions, and it informs all aspects of how we solve problems and how we deliver insights. I'll often talk about it as being sort of a mix of science and online qualitative techniques, and what it does is it allows us to develop the right questions so that we can really get inside of the respondent's head. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, our team of qualitative experts. Not only do we have our Denver-based moderators, but we also have a team of qualitative specialists whose sole job it is to make sure that we understand our clients' research questions. To date, we've moderated over 100,000 conversations and have certainly talked to respondents about a wide variety of topics and issues. In terms of how you can work with us, there really are 2 ways that our clients will engage, standalone and hybrid. I think what's important to remember is that regardless of which approach our clients take, the process is the same. So while the hybrid solution integrates our conversations into an online quantitative survey, our standalone approach integrates conversations into an online screener. So to speak a little bit more specifically about each, with hybrid, we can be integrated into virtually any survey that you're fielding with us or with another research partner. Conversations tend to run between 15 and 20 minutes, and they can explore consumer survey responses or a larger related topic, and this is the type of research that we've typically worked on with Grove Insights. Standalone sessions tend to be a little bit longer. I'd say on average they are probably 45 to 60 minutes. The conversations are really ideal for early stage exploration, blue sky questions, even for post-quant deeper dives. Both approaches allow us to re-expose and share stimuli with respondents so we can show TV, print, or any other type of advertising.
And now I'm going to just talk about a couple of case studies and things that we've done. The first one has to do with a statewide race 2 years ago, and we all know that this kind of mudslinging negative campaigning stuff is effective at some level, and it does move the dial, but we also know that it's more difficult to communicate, and I will say thankfully, because voters have become kind of more skeptical about the process, and especially the kind of the days of the sinister organ music and the kind of hyperbole over the top kind of don 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 stuff doesn't work. And I say thankfully, because I think that was, that didn't really work for me personally as a practitioner. We had a situation, a statewide race, where we did polling, and one of the things that we found about our opponent was some hypocrisy around drunk driving and drunk driving legislation. The individual had DUIs and then also had voted to weaken drunk driving laws. And that's, very sensitive topic. It's also very top of mind, and it's hot. And we were concerned, I personally was concerned it was too hot. And we wanted to go and just take a look. And so we did an ad with a mother of who had lost a child to a drunk driver. And she says, "I'll never forget that day. The doorbell rang. It was the police telling me my daughter had been killed by a drunk driver. After 18 years, not a day goes by that I don't think about it." So when I heard, this candidate had sponsored a lot of reduced penalties for drunk drivers, I just couldn't believe it. Then I'd read he'd been arrested twice for drunk driving himself. Minnesotans need a governor who's on our side, and that's not this person. And as I said, we all made it, watched it, went, are we sure? Are we sure? Are we sure? And the bottom line is that we looked at a number of different measures. Did it make you more or less likely to support the candidate? Obviously, the intention was to make it less likely, and we have high numbers there. And we look at the overall and then the much less likely numbers, and this and missing votes, the missing votes ad really, kind of dialed people off this candidate pretty quickly. We also looked at we asked questions after, he asked a bunch of kind of standard questions up front, their vote preference, some kind of words and phrases to describe both candidates, both positive and negative, and then asked specific questions after each ad. One was communicated a message that's important to me, and we also asked just how persuasive. And then you can see, in the upper right-hand corner, that ad one more time is kind of up at the top for being important and persuasive. We asked how believable they thought the ads were, and you can see the drunk driving ad was also kind of in the top tier there. And then this is the lines, and we look at, we looked at a number of different voters, and this was a particularly complicated governor's race because there was a viable third-party candidate, and we had to make sure that while we were going after our opponent, we weren't moving those votes into the third-party column, making it harder for our candidate to win. It was, in our view, it was okay if there's certain kinds of voters that voters would never be available to us to move into that third-party candidate column, but if they were persuadable voters that should belong to us, we certainly didn't want to push them off the mark with this ad. So we look at the dials and really, look to see where the lines worked and where they didn't. We also, looked at all of the qualitative data, and it was surprising and new information. The combination of two illegal acts and the legislation said a lot about his character. The kind of responses we got were very, very hot from people. It spoke to real fears. They felt very self-interested. They felt a lot of outrage because they had a lot of anger at drunk driving more generally. They found the story and the person presenting the story to be believable and to be authentic to their state. And for a number of people, it was like, don't tell me anymore. And when we looked, it was, the lines that worked in the ad, after 18 years, not a day goes by, when I heard this person sponsored the bill, and then the arrested twice, and then on our side. So a lot of the ad had kind of upticks, but that's where we saw the lines really start to move. We also look at the average rating, where they end, the kind of peak score, where's the highest point. Those are some of the measures that we look at. And then we really spend some time looking at the answers that people gave. These are quotes, direct quotes from respondents. I don't like a public servant who gets drunk and drives. There are too many drunks on the road. He's not a real leader. This speaks volumes. It shows his horrible personal attributes and wrong choices. Really hot language. And generally speaking with these, we don't get this kind of, hot reaction. Drunk driving is not only dangerous, but it's against the law. The governor should be someone that does things by the book. I don't like negative ads, but I do want to know when the candidate is doing things that are illegal. You know, I realize people make mistakes, but to make the same mistake again for the 2 DUIs raises a major red flag. And then we had a number of people, the second bullet, you know, maybe he's trying to weaken the laws to save himself. And then also really wanted to see how well did this mother was she able to pull it off. And, you know, did she look like an actress or did she look like your average Minnesota mom? And we heard mostly the latter. I don't believe any mother that went through that kind of catastrophic incident would lie about something. I feel like that particular ad with the lady talking was very persuasive, much more than the other ads. She seemed very real, not fake. Nothing is more persuasive than a mother so angry she's in tears, whether it's my mom or someone else's mom. 100% believable if it's from a real person. So definitely kind of hit a nerve with people. And then what we really weren't expecting was you know, this horrible attribute speaks volumes about his character, irresponsible, poor judgments, illegal. The ad actually went farther than where we thought they'd end up. We were just kind of on a he's not on your side and leave it at there, and they went farther with it. And what we ended up doing actually in this campaign was we put it on early, and then we put it on late. So the same ad, it was so powerful that we used it at 2 different junctures in the campaign, kind of in the middle of the summer, and then in October as people are making their final decisions, we kind of brought it back to remind them, and this person is not governor.
The one thing I'd add to this, going back to what Lisa said at the very beginning of this example, is in looking at all of these quotes, you see very little of people saying, "Well, I want to go research this. I want to look at something a little bit more deeply. I'm not sure I completely believe this." The key is to find facts and information that is inherently believable to folks. It makes sense to them. The logic, it's logical. People are, as Lisa said, very, very jaded today, and ensuring that we can find the, that nugget of information that people, accept without qualifications is difficult. And when you find it in something like this, it's very beneficial.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because one of the things that happens for people that, some people will say, I just, outright, I don't believe I don't believe this. But what often happens is the kind of kill it with questions phenomenon, where like, well, was it taken out of context? Was there a bigger part of the vote? What was the, what was leading up to this? Question, 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 which is almost always an indication that we're not going to move them with whatever we're trying to say, because if they can't sort of buy into it and they have to either go find research or kill the thing with too many questions, we're not cutting through. We did a campaign in Oregon, 2 ballot measures, where the goal was to increase taxes, and we managed to do so. One of the things that happens in campaigns is, how well, what's going on with the other side and how effective are they? There tends to be this assumption and that whatever they're doing must be brilliant because they're spending money to do it. And sometimes that's not the case. And what can happen is you can get pulled off course strategically because you see something like, well, if they put it on the air, it must be good. There must be a good reason. This must be the most brilliant strategic decision they're doing. We should figure out what we're going to do in response. And oftentimes that's not the case. And this was a situation where the other side had done, the no side said, you need some reasons to vote no on these? How about 70,000? Economists estimate that this will cost 70,000 Oregon jobs. That's right, 70,000. They said the number 3 times. All because the politicians in Salem couldn't tighten their belts and decided to raise taxes on businesses and hardworking Oregonians. If these measures pass, taxes will go way up, jobs will be lost, and we'll end up paying more for gas, groceries, and utilities. So, and the gas, groceries, and utilities is also sort of interesting because Oregon's one of the few places that doesn't have a sales tax, and these weren't even sales tax measures. But so, campaign looks at it, freaks out, oh my gosh, they've got this great ad, what do? We should pull our ads off the air, we need to put on something to directly respond to this. We had seen through previous research that it didn't look like that 70 number was, somehow that message wasn't working, but we weren't sure why, the 70,000. And what we found was gigantic credibility problems. People called it full of distortions and lies, fear-mongering, job loss is a scare tactic. People found that in a state like Oregon, saying 70,000 people are going to lose their jobs because we're changing a law and raising the corporate minimum from $10, which was set in the Depression era, to $100, just weren't buying it. saying something will eliminate jobs doesn't make it so. And again, the blowback was, compare that to the drunk driver ad. We've got people really coming in hard. Here we go again with businesses whining about taxes. A corporation will not close its store just because it has to pay $150 instead of $10. We got a lot of that. If the business couldn't up it $140 a year, they were going to go out of business anyway. It starts with how many jobs lost. How do they know that? Again, look at all the questions. Give me the facts. Where will the jobs be lost? Why will this cause jobs to be lost? I don't believe the 70,000 number. It's way too high considering there's only 3 million people in the state. And who are these so-called economists? So they did the very thing we had mentioned, that kind of kill it with questions. The numbers were very low on being informative and easy to understand on both of these ads relative to the stuff we were testing on ours, and problematic. So not only did that same ad test tell us what we needed to do to make our ads better, it also told us that we could take a few deep breaths and not worry about what they were putting up on TV. And so it helped us make sure that we were maximizing our resources and not getting pulled off course strategically, which can happen more often than it should, frankly. I'll turn it back over to my iModerate friends.
Perfect, and this is really our last slide. So, as we've talked about over the last 30 minutes or so, it really is more important than ever to get political ad testing right. So wrapping up, I wanted to quickly touch on Voter Insider, the partnership we've developed with Catalyst to help alleviate some of the shortcomings of conducting political research online, namely the absence of verified voter sample. What I mean by that is prior to the creation of this approach, researchers had to rely solely on voters' memories of their previous voting behavior when qualifying the audience. The challenge, of course, being that voters don't always remember that they voted in the 2008 primary, for example, or if they voted at all. So with Voter Insider, we've coordinated a data match between Catalyst's voter record database with respondents who are part of the major sample companies in the country. And so we're effectively able to provide researchers with over 5 million matched records online. So this means that we now have the ability to conduct the type of hybrid and qualitative-only projects we've discussed with verified voters. So moving forward, we hope that this approach is just another tool to help make online political ad testing even more effective. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to questions and answers.
Great, thanks so much, guys. Lisa, Ben, and Christy, I do have some very good questions from the audience. Lisa and Ben, this one will be directed at you guys. How do your strategy and tactics change as election day comes closer and closer?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. I mean, one of the things that the ad testing helps us do is figure out our sequence and what the strategic arc is. And we know that voters, there's a different subset of the electorate that engages early as opposed to those who engage late. Some of it is, predicated on socioeconomic status. If you are really just struggling to get by, are you really paying attention to what's going on in the world around you? And we found, not necessarily. And so sometimes we'll start with, ads that are really tailored to the elites among us. We all have opinion leaders in our world. The person that you want to call when you want to ask their opinion on, gay marriage or an agenda around birth control or, tax increases. And so oftentimes the kind of first round of advertising will really still try to move that persuadable subset of the electorate, but it may also really want to kind of tag into those influentials that tend to have an impact. And they're not talking about newspaper editors and elected officials. I'm talking about your uncle or aunt that everyone in the family goes to because Uncle Joe is the person who reads the paper every day and he seems to have smart ideas that you agree with, and trying to move those people. Sometimes we're also trying to shore up voters and lay down some inoculation. If we think we're going to be called liberal with a million adjectives in front of it, hopelessly, desperately, aggressively, whatever, we will try to look to see what would be some of the things to ameliorate concerns around a person being too ideologically driven, and kind of set that up. And then making sure that we have really, the good stuff coming late. Increasingly, late has got a different definition because of so many states with vote by mail and early voting that, there's a growing number of Americans who get it done and get the ballot in, and you also want to make sure that you're not kind of saving all your good stuff after that window, so that a big chunk of voters who tend to be disproportionately older have already cast their ballots.
Great, thanks, Lisa. Christy, I believe this one's for you. Could the panel address the value of sample composition of registered voters versus likely voters?
I'm not sure I follow. In terms of, can you get it one more time?
Could the panel address the value of sample composition of registered voters versus likely voters?
And I'm happy to talk about that too if you want. I mean, we tend to screen for likely voters, with the exception of some states that have pretty big same-day registration surges. And then it gets more dicey because it's not even, likely versus registered. It's, making sure we're talking to people who at some point intend to vote. But for us, there's Catalyst data that has turnout modeling scores on it that iModerate has access to, that will help us understand that we're getting people that are really truly going to show up. It matters less this year because it's a presidential election year, but I don't think anybody thinks that the turnout in 2012 is going to look anywhere near what it was in 2008. So trying to figure out who those people are, but it's really, in our view, we really want to talk to those most likely to participate.
And I'd add that in just looking in terms of the 5 million number of respondents, especially when you're looking at statewide data, even in searching for likely voters within that 5 million number of registered voters, we always have a very good, robust sample that matches what we know based on our polling to be the the universe of likely voters within the state.
And I'll just really quickly follow up on both Ben and Lisa's comments. Certainly with the Voter Insider panel, we are able to, of course, target likely voters. We also have their past vote history, so we can pull, voters who voted in recent elections as well, and that certainly can help us profile an audience, or at least send sample out to an audience who is more likely to vote in general. We have found, from other research that, if you don't go out to that audience of registered voters, people tend to think that it's un-American not to vote, and so it's not that they're outright lying about their registration or vote history, it's just that they think that they're telling you the right thing.
And we will oftentimes screen out, people with ardent views on either side of an issue or a candidate and really just focus on the people in the middle. So there are plenty of times where what we're doing is not a statistically representative universe of the electorate as a whole in that particular jurisdiction, but a really good sampling of the persuasion universe. Our polling told us that we need to, move in order to get the win.
Great. Another question here. Why would you do this research, this qualitative research in this manner instead of doing it in groups?
The couple things. One is we get to talk to hundreds of voters, and it's much more cost effective. The negativity biases that come into focus groups, Christy was just talking about one social norm. Another social norm is to never admit that a negative ad is effective in a focus group setting. And so what they'll do is tell you why it's bad to do negative ads, and then when you ask them what they think about the candidate at the end, they're telling you everything the negative ad said. We're also seeing this, kind of more of a voter critique and not meeting them where they are. The nice thing about what we're doing here is that they are kind of in their own world responding to us as opposed to us getting them to a focus group. And I don't know if other people have found this, but we find it harder and harder to get real live voters to show up for a focus group, for example, just because they got to step out of their lives and go find some building. And and I'm not taking anything away from the focus group because it's immensely valuable and being able to have those conversations that way. But to the extent that we can meet people where they are in their own lives, we're going to get a wider swath of people because of the fewer self-selection biases. Obviously they have to be computer savvy, but they don't have to, kind of take it upon themselves to get to a particular place and then, kind of give it up in front of strangers.
And I'd add to that just in terms of the difference between focus groups and online work, doing it online, allows you to avoid some of the problems of groupthink. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have been in focus groups where one particularly or two particularly influential participants start moving the group a certain way. And yes, obviously the moderator's there to compensate for that, but you still are presented with that. In the online setting, it's someone that's sitting at their computer. They're not influenced by anyone else around them. And so you really are able to get their individual opinion on it. And more importantly, they're not sitting, again, going back to the focus group model, they're not sitting in a room with 7, 8, 10 strangers and are hesitant to give their opinion about something because it might not be politically correct. You're going to get much more raw qualitative data from the online setting where people are not censoring themselves and really telling you what they think about something.
That's a huge point.
Great. One more here. What's the single biggest hurdle for those people in charge of producing political ads this year?
Being drowned out by all the other stuff going on. Trying to do too much with too little. I think there's a sense that, we can say lots and lots and lots of things to voters who are having a hard time staying engaged, partly because they're not sure anything's going to change no matter who gets elected, and so kind of cutting through that cynicism and trying to be much more careful about having a clear, self-interested message that your average voter can say, I get it, and I get that you get me. And the you get me part's really, really important right now.
Great. Just looking through some more here. Question just came in. Do you send out webcams to respondents or only recruit those with their own cameras or enabled PCs? We'll let Christy field that one.
Sure. So our platform is actually text-based, so having the video component is not sort of a critical component to our success. So again, speaking to that idea of the anonymous environment, we really found that not having that video face-to-face element is really, again, it puts respondents in a mindset where they feel very comfortable opening up and talking about some of these more sensitive issues. So the camcorder is not really an issue for this platform.
And can you, Christy, do you mind just talking a little bit about the moment-to-moment and how that works? Because it's so helpful, and I think it's really a pretty easy thing for people to figure out how to use.
Sure. So the moment-to-moment element, it's an online dial that we're able to build into any of our hybrid projects. So basically, just as if you are participating in an in-person dial experience, respondents are watching the video or the advertisement, and they are able to react on a moment-to-moment basis to what they're seeing. Then on the back end, you're, of course, able to analyze the results. The beauty here being that everyone who's in your survey will have participated, so you have a very robust quantitative base size to work with.
Great. I think that's about it in terms of questions. We have a number of questions on sample and panel and things like that, and we're happy to kind of answer those offline because a lot came in. So you can always contact Lisa Grove at Grove Insight or Ben, obviously Christy here at iModerate anytime, and we'll be happy to answer any more of your questions. But we want to thank you all for joining us today, and a special thanks again to Lisa, Christy, and Ben for leading us through this webinar. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Have a good
everyone.
day.
Go fight, win.
Go fight, win. Bye-bye.
Bye.